I use an Awada micron for my hoof detail work, and I shoot without the tip on the brush, so the tip of the needle's exposed. I found that I can get the finest detail like that. It may not work for you, but it does work for me, and it's a little unsafe. You know, you can possibly bump the needle into things, but it's how I do it, so good luck to you. Okay, I'm going to start with a basic flesh tone for the hoof. I just do a dusting coat. I lightly mist the hoof wall just to add a little bit of color. I go a little darker at the bottom, and at the top is the natural coronary band that's lighter on a real hoof. My flesh tone is created from, I start with titanium white. I add a few drops of burnt sienna and then mix in raw umber. Now the more coats you put on, of course, the darker it's going to get. So just start light and you can build a little more color with more layers. These hooves have a little bit of a texture, but we're going to go back in the next section of the video, and we're going to add horizontal banding to give the hoof a little bit more depth, and we'll use burnt umber for that. On this next section, I'm going to add the horizontal banding that will give the hoof a little more depth. I'm using burnt umber, Com Art, so it's a real thin paint that works with very little graining. I add a little bit of shading first, just a light mist coat, and then I go back in and add some real fine hairline striping to the hoof to give it more depth and color. I like to give the frogs on the bottom a little shading and just kind of a little bit of mist of color to the sole. And just a little darker on the edges of the hoof. And then the horizontal striping. A little shading on the frog. A little cut to the hoof wall, or the base of the hoof. Then I also work vertically up and down the hoof. Hoofs have natural striping. And you'll see on any shell colored hoof, you'll see horizontal and vertical striping. I'm going up into the white a little bit on the pastern and the fetlock area, but that's okay because I'm going to go back into the white when the hooves are finished, and I'll touch them all up and make sure they're nice and bright and clean. I've only got about 15 layers of white on the legs at this point. So when the hooves are finished, then I'll go back into the white on the legs and finish them. This horse has ermine spots on his cornet bands, and so those spots are also going to give us a place to put darker hoof striping, and we'll cover that in the next section of the video. Now if this horse was just going to have white hooves, this is how he'd look at this point. I'd leave the hooves just like that. Okay, we're going to start, this section of the video is going to be striping the black part on the hooves. Right now what we've done so far is a base coat of flesh color, and then the second layer was real fine hairline vertical and horizontal striping of the hoof with burnt sienna, or burnt umber, I'm sorry. This section of the video I'm going to add the black vertical striping, and I'm going to use Badger Black for that. It's a real thin airbrush paint, and again I'll be using the Iwata Micron. The striping you want to move in the direction of the growth of the hoof. I do some finer striping even in between the ermine spots. Just build thin layers. Get some nice little thin stripes and some larger, darker areas. And even on the areas where there is no ermine spots, I still add a little striping to give the hoof texture and color. And where there are ermine stripes, I build up thinner layers. To give the hoof some interest and color. Angle your stripes in the direction of the hoof growth. It's okay if I spray up into the white and get a little overspray, because I will be going back into the white legs later. They only have about 20 coats at this point of white. They're still going to need several more. My airbrush is starting to get a little bit of a clog on the tip, so we're going to stop for a second and clean that off. I use just a little bit of Windex on a Q-tip, clean the tip of the needle. It's imperative that you clean the needle because little globs of paint will fly off onto your hoof and you'll have chunks in your finished work. So see, the airbrush is nice and clean. I'll spray it. Nothing's coming off. We're safe to start the next round of hoof striping. Tail's probably in the way. Try to get an angle where you can see how the needle on the brush just barely lets any paint out. Just gradually build until you get the dark shade that you want. You want a nice black there, just do a few more coats. And don't forget to paint the bottoms of your hooves. Your frogs will have a little more color. I love the way the striping comes in around the edges of the hoof, so I leave that. And just add a little dusting for color. I think I'd like this a little bit darker right here. A little bit of a darker edge right there. And that's it.